Lonesome Lands podcast, Lonesome Report, April, end of April. What day is it?
29th.
April 29th. The mod case that we've covered on, I don't know how many episodes now. We've talked about it about every week, something, and those charges have been dropped. Shad Sullivan is here with your exclusive report.
Yep. Mod charges are dropped, dismissed upon the motion of the United States and good cause appearing. It is ordered that the indictment filed in the above entitled matter is dismissed without prejudice. It is further ordered that the defendant Charles Maude is exonerated from provisions of the order setting conditions of release. It is further ordered that defendant Heather Maude is exonerated from provisions of the order setting conditions of release. Dated April 28th, 2025. What this means is that the federal charges against the Maudes have been dropped, dismissed, and they can now talk to each other about the case and talk outside of the realm of their conditions on the case. I assume that also means that the removal of firearms will be rescinded, and the mods are currently in the air on their way to Washington, D.C. to meet with Secretary Brooke Rollins to discuss this case and let the American people further know what has happened.
Lonesome Lands podcast, special report, I guess. Me and Shad recorded yesterday our weekly Lonesome report, and then this morning was the press conference with Charles and Heather Maude and Brooke Rollins, and so we just jumped on here real quick, and I'll stick this at the front of the podcast and just kind of give our reaction to the press conference of this case that we have spent a lot of time talking about. If you're not familiar, I guess Charles and Heather Maude have been indicted and face prison sentences for offense that had been in the same place for 50 years. So Shad, what'd you think? Since Shad was kind of a driving force and was thanked during the press conference, and he's really the reason we've spent so much time on this deal. I guess one thing I want to say before you give you a chance to talk is
Yeah.
I want people to realize when you bought a plane ticket, you flew up there, you missed your son's track meet, there's commitments that you have that you kind of put aside for issues like this, and I hope people really do appreciate it. I know Heather and Charles do, but it made me proud to have you on here, and I guess, what do you think?
Well, geez, thanks. I'm going to tear up. Listen, Representative Harriet Hagman said it the best. She said, "This is a beautiful day for civil liberty." And I don't think anybody could have said it any better. I don't think anybody was more appropriate to say it during this press conference. Even though there's this split in agriculture, uh, you know, the mods have brought every organization together, from trade associations to government agencies to citizens. They have brought these people together unknowingly, unwillingly, but beautifully, all at the same time, to fight for a common cause of liberty and freedom. And what could be more American than that, right? What could be more American than that? It's an awesome day. Secretary Brooke Rollins, right at this moment, I am so grateful for her and taking this on. And she said in the press conference, she said, in comparing this administration to the last, um, she said, we are not the same, and we are not the same. And what we're seeing here is a spiritual war of good versus evil. And we have to pick what side we're on. And obviously we've picked the good side. And there are going to be ideologues that rise against this movement. There are those people, and she said it best. I think Christy Nome said it best. The same people who want to throw the Mod family in prison are wanting these terrorists and cartels out of prison, the people. And that's the spiritual war that we are fighting against. So today, I'm super grateful for President Trump and his pursuit of justice on this. I'm thankful for Kristi Noem, the Secretary of Homeland Security. She said Trump's focus is law and order, and that's the first step we have to take to get our country back to the foundation, the respect of the Constitution, and the respect of each other and the people, and finding balance in production agriculture. So I'm grateful for Kristi Noem. I'm super grateful for Secretary Brooke Rollins. I hope that she lets me meet her someday and thank her personally.
She heard your
I'm,
name.
huh?
She heard your name.
Yeah. I'm super grateful for this U.S. Attorney, Brett Tolan. Um, I'm going to seek him out, and
Yeah.
I'm going to thank him personally. I am. I think the real hero here is Representative Harriet Hagman. Harriet Hagman does exactly what she says. I respect Rounds out of South Dakota. He has a good, demeanor. I really like him. I always have liked him. But Harriet Hagman is a bulldog, and she does what she says. And to me, there is nobody in Washington, D.C., under President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance that is more presidential than her. Her knowledge of the Constitution and of law and order and the way America was founded is by far and away greater than anybody else's in Washington, D.C. Her and Massey too, but she is a true hero. And then obviously the Maude family, my Lord, what they have persevered through this trial, which is truly tragic in that it took their innocence away, their innocence of production agriculture, of community gifting, of family nights when you're going to bed and you're not supposed to be talking to your spouse in bed because you were both charged with erroneous felony charges, and your kids are probably snuggled right beside you because they're scared to sleep in their own rooms. This was an egregious abuse of power. And it is an example of how lawfare has been used by the left, by the anti-American sentiments. And I am proud that this family stood strong. And somebody told me here a while back, they said, I don't think the Forest Service understood who they came up against when they crossed Heather. Heather is tough, and you can tell they're tough. These people go out and they do their chores every morning, ice, snow, sleet, and rain. They serve their community. Charles Maude was instrumental in getting this beautiful fire station built out in the middle of nowhere. Heather Maude every Saturday goes and sells their farm-raised beef and pork and other products in Rapid City at the farmers market. These kids are involved in 4-H. This is truly the epitome of the American family, living the American agricultural dream. And so I applaud them for holding steady. And it's not about me. It's not about you. There was a lot of people that had many different avenues in this and deserve great respect and thoughtfulness. And I thank them all. I mean, Rachel Gable and Carrie Stedheim with the Tri-State News, they broke the story. And they called me, or they didn't call me, they called Brett and Eric, Brett Kinsey and Eric Groper, and said, I think the Property Rights Committee needs to be involved in this. And that's how I got involved. And they drove up there. Eric and Brett drove up there to the site, looked at it, called me that day from the site and said, you need to research this and get this, help them get this rectified. And so that's what got me involved. But it was so reminiscent of my family's plight in the 90s that I couldn't walk away from it. I go back to 1999 when I always talk about this first of its kind of a public-private partnership between the Nature Conservancy and rogue state agencies at that time really had a large effect on my family. And I can remember it was so foreign to so many people that we did not know how to react. Social media wasn't in play, and listen, we did not have the support of our cattlemen's organizations. We did not have support of conservative organizations. Even some of our neighbors were not against us, but they didn't know what to do. And so what I learned through that, Jim, was that these people are going to go through these things. And because they're going to go through these things and they don't know the experiences that my family has gone through and others have gone through. Let's talk about the Hammonds, the Hage family, the Bundys. These experiences create perspective. And so my perspective on this was that this young family is being victimized by a rogue agency, a rogue employee of the Forest Service, and they need help. And I think Bill Bullard with RCAF USA said it best when somebody had told why are you guys working on this case? They're not members. And Bill Bullard said, we represent the American cattlemen, whether they're members or not of our organization. And he said that because it's the right thing to do. And so, me flying up there as a representative of American property rights, RCAF USA, as Shad Sullivan, as my family, from a representative of Lonesome Lands and the Lonesome Report, and as an American citizen, it was the right thing to do. And the Lord gave me an ability to communicate these problems to the public and an understanding of these problems. And so that's why I did what I did. Jim, you and Keely Cavello, Rachel, Carrie, Amanda, there was a host of other people that really pushed this out. And I think that is why the tire rolled down the hill, so to speak, a little faster in the last couple of months, because this should have been taken care of a year ago, and it wasn't. And the power of social media put pressure on them. I think they would have handled it. I truly think Rollins and Kristi Noem and President Trump and Pam Bondi would have handled this. But in the back door of this deal, Brett Tolan snuck in there and pushed, and it just happened. And man, I'm forever grateful. So congratulations to the Maude family, and congratulations to Liberty and Freedom, because we took a step forward, not a step backwards today.
Yeah, that's what I felt like watching that press conference. It was like when
Yeah.
she come out and was talking about, the English and the revolution is persecution and that kind of stuff. It just kind of made you proud to be an American and
Yeah.
proud to live in this kind of time, because we've heard in agriculture these kind of stories for decades, and it's like we're at a turning point almost, to see a family get up there and be brought to DC where this such stuff all originated from, and to get their chance to talk. And Heather did it amazing. I thought that would be very hard. I mean, she did a great job there, and even holding it together after all she's been through. It did bring a tear to your eye, kind of, and
It did.
seeing them kids and everything. It was just, I mean, it's what we hoped for when we started talking about this deal, and to
Yeah.
see it happen was awesome. So,
Well, and during this whole thing, Brett, of course, we've worked on property rights for a long time, and the attack on private property. I was interviewed by Glenn Beck last year, and he said one of the questions to me from him was, "What do you see as the greatest threat to American agriculture?" And I said, "The attack on private property rights." That is the very foundation of liberty and freedom, and they know that. These our enemies know this, and they know if they can control private property, whether that be your coat or your access to food or your land, they can take your freedom and liberty away from you. So all of this is about the land, and since this has happened, uh, the complaints of abuse by federal agencies through the BLM, the Park Service, National Forest Service have exponentially increased. I mean, I'm getting calls, I'm sure you are too, getting emails and calls about these egregious overreaches by agencies. And what these agencies and these rogue employees in these agencies have forgot is that they are here to serve us. They're here to serve the people, not for the people to serve them. They do not have the right to do what they've done in these cases. They don't have the power to do that. And only communists, only those who are in pursuit of collectivism want to do that, because communist rule is from the top down. American rule, Republican rule, democratic rule is from the bottom up. And that's what we have to remember. But these people that are calling, and emailing you and me and other people, I say, hold on, the cavalry's coming. Today, uh, Secretary Rollins rolled out a complaint form called the Lawfare Complaint Form. It's a porthole where you can go and air your grievances, tell them your story to USDA, and they're going to open up investigations. And I encourage everyone in New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, Colorado, even if you're not in a Western state, Wyoming, let me just say, I encourage you to go to that porthole at USDA.gov, USDA.gov, and it's called the Lawfare Complaint Form. And that is opened up today. I encourage you to go to that and file your complaints. But I want to reiterate that, Harriet Hagman said, and Secretary Rollins said, they have tens of thousands of employees across the Forest Service and these other agencies that are good, patriotic, wholesome people that believe in liberty and freedom and believe that they are serving. But there is a festering among these agencies, between the agencies and landholders, allotment holders, lessees, farmers, and ranchers, that needs to be reckoned with. We have to find balance and bring this balance back to where everybody gets along and that we can provide food, because ultimately this is a food security and national security issue. We have to be able to produce food here in America, and we are net importers of food now. And I won't get off on that train, but this is part of the reason we is because of this attack on private property. And I will always go to my grave saying that tyranny has no loyalty. In other words, these people who are tyrants against freedom lovers, at the end, there'll be two tyrants left over, and one tyrant is going to kill the other, and one will be left alone. And what will it matter? What will it matter? It won't matter, because everybody's gone. So we have to fight for future, or for liberty and freedom and the future of our kids, the legacy for our children, to be able to taste the sweet taste of freedom. It's very important. And we have to get rid of the ideologues. No matter what, Jim, the ideologues will never change their stripes, because they have a heart issue. This is a heart issue. It's a spiritual war. And they're never going to. That's why you have to get rid of them and get them out of these agencies, and then rebuild the agencies with law and order and fairness and good people. And that's
Yeah, and so before we started, we were kind of comparing notes a little bit, and we both had the same thing kind of underlined, and that was we are not the same. And I think that goes to, you and me have taken plenty of flack. My mom told me, she said, when you started this Lonesome Lands deal, you weren't going to get in, you said you weren't going to get into politics. And and I did. I mean, I said I didn't want to get into politics, but it just goes to show how much has changed in 7 years. And when she says we've seen the Facebook posts about how, we're Trump apologists or whatever. But that's the difference. This press conference would not have happened under Joe Biden's administration. Biden's administration was talked a lot about today, and they are as given the reason that this whole thing happened. And I think there's probably the amount that they talked about that. It makes me think that there is more to this than just a rogue forest agent. I mean, they blamed it squarely on the past administration for having this happen.
And
Uh,
I think that that is an example of, these land issues really started under the Clinton administration, when they were setting all of these parks aside and talking about rewilding and, my friend
monuments, all that
and
stuff.
monuments, and my friend Sean Pond out of Colorado, he is working diligently along with, I think there's the Blue Ribbon Coalition, American Stewards of Liberty, RCAF USA, all of these people that understand these issues, and even Public Lands Council, but this started under the who was it? Bill Clinton administration, and then it never really stopped under Bush. And then Obama, it was emboldened under Obama. My memory of Barack Obama is him walking off a plane holding a book that says the Post America War or Post America World. That was the title of that book, and I'll never forget that. And so that was emboldened. Now, the Biden administration is complicit in that. I don't think
They
Joe
put the
Biden.
they put the pedal to the metal on it.
They put the
It's yeah.
pedal to the metal, and it's not Joe Biden. It's the people who
No,
were running this administration, and they knew that they had to double down, and now they are doubling down. The what I call the leftovers or the holdovers. They're hiding in these agencies. They're not gone. They're going to be there, and they're going to hope for a change of administration down the road, so they can come back out and be the collectivists they are. So I hold everybody accountable in saying, you know, if you love liberty and freedom and you want to leave something to your kids, you have to get in on this fight with this, and you
yeah.
have to run for your local school boards and your local commissions and your state legislature and your national legislature. And we have to get good people back in office. It starts at home, Jim. This starts at home. And that is a example of how our federal government is created from the bottom up. It's of, by, and for the people.
Right on. So I guess this is just the start. I feel like we're gonna, this has really got me interested, and I've been talking with ex-BLM people, and I think we're gonna talk a lot about, public lands and all this kind of stuff moving forward. But for today, there's, I think the thing to remember is there's one good family that's going to be sleeping a lot better tonight, and there is a number of people in the forest service that are not going to be sleeping well tonight. I think Brooke Rollins made that clear, and that was wonderful to hear.
God bless America.
All right. The other thing that came out this week, and I feel like surprised everybody, was a Common Ground Summit. Maybe I'm wrong, but of everybody I talked to, including a media person who seems to be pretty plugged in, nobody had any clue this was going on.
Yeah.
And what it was, apparently 40 of the most influential cattle producers in the country all got invited and flown into Denver and sat around and decided what they want to get done in the cattle industry. This apparently goes on the heels of there's been a number of producer productivity meetings, they've called them, which is LMA, Livestock Marketing Associations meetings they put together. And so their goal is to increase producer productivity, I guess. Or is that what it's called?
Producer productivity.
Yeah,
Well, their
something like
vision,
that. The
they have a
Common
vision and
Ground
they,
Summit is what the new one is
yeah,
called. But this
the
kind of
common
goes
ground summit.
off. Apparently, I was listening to a podcast with, apparently it's Joe Goggins, Jake Parnell, who are the two guys with LMA that are kind of leading this whole thing up. Um, and there's a lot to it. I guess there's a lot to it. Because just as far as on the outside, to me, when they first announced this and they put it out there, I think it made everybody kind of scratch their head a little bit. And to me, I felt like it looked horrible.
Why?
The optics of it looks terrible because you bring in, it's almost like the feudal system, right? You have the lords meeting together to decide the direction of where we're going. And I'm not. and of course you're going to be negative about this because we're not talking about things you want to talk about, which is, yeah, I mean, you're kind of right there. Um, I don't know, just on the face of it. And then they didn't say anything about what they were talking about. So then everybody was kind of wondering what they're talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I don't know. What'd you think?
Well, when I first saw it come out on Facebook, I was taken aback by kind of what it looked like. Just from my perspective, it looked like a round table of the elites, the elitists, right? And nobody had heard about it. I guess they did have some meetings, a couple, for the last 2 years trying to gain support for this. I talked to a gentleman that was there at length about it, and he said they did have some meetings in Montana and other states, but otherwise, it was mostly unbeknownst to American cattle producers. And I think from the outside, you kind of looked like, well, these elitists have convened in the Brown Palace Hotel in Denver, one of the most influential cattlemen's gatherings places in the United States over the last century and a half, and it just had a bad look. But then when I called and talked to one of the participants, and me and him agree on a lot of things, and there's some things we don't agree on. We actually I got to hear what they were talking about, and they talked a lot about things that do concern us, tax policy, risk management tools, labor, and the things that affect us through labor. And so there is a lot going on there, but the optics weren't that great. And I don't know. I mean, I guess my concern, Jim, is who paid for it. Was it Livestock Marketing Association? Did those funds come through our checkoff? I don't know, and maybe it's none of my business. But when you have a meeting of minds like that come together and they use phrases like stakeholders and sustainable, it just goes back to the same old stuff for me. And
Yeah, I mean, I feel like my skepticism is warranted because of where we've come from and what we've been dealing with. And,
yeah,
the one thing we've reported on with Livestock Marketing Association is they pay their CEO 20% of their total revenue. They
yeah,
have the highest CEO. Is it CEO or president? I think they call him the president.
I
Um,
don't know.
he makes more money than the American Red Cross CEO. I mean, he's like in the top 20 of the highest paid CEOs in the country.
Yeah.
And so then you look at motivation of where this is coming from. I think there is a fear of the people who are pushing so hard for EID, and I don't understand it, but there's a fear that could get pulled back. I think if you ask me, and you could tell me I'm obviously biased and in my echo chamber, but I think the biggest issues surrounding cattle producers are mandated EID, pulling that back, reform the beef checkoff, and mandatory country of origin labeling. I think they pulled in people into that room that no one is going to fight for that stuff.
Yeah.
And from what I've heard about these producer meetings, you get told before they start what you're not going to talk about.
I wonder
Um,
if they had to sign an NDA. Do you
I
know?
don't believe so. But and that comes from the first one of these happened in Arizona during 2020. COVID, it was a market disaster at the time. And as soon as the attendees showed up, they were handed a non-disclosure agreement that they were supposed to sign, and some did not. um,
Yeah.
and so to me, so we kind of have our own preconceived notions about these kind of deals. Um, and so also that meeting came together during a marketing disaster. Like people were going broke at that time. This time we're calling this meeting during, record prices, the best cattle market we've seen in our lifetimes. and it's kind of like, so of course me, who's skeptical about everything, I'm like, where's the motivation here? And my feeling is the motivation is they don't want to talk about checkoff reform. They don't want checkoff reform talked about. They don't want to talk about getting rid of the EID mandate. They don't want that talked about. And they don't want to talk about mandatory country of origin labeling. So they made sure that that isn't getting talked about. We have the 40 biggest producers or most influential people in the country go in there, and say that this is a combination of all organizations and all people, all producers and all walks of life, and this is what we want. And then they're going to go to DC and say that, which then, kind of takes away any momentum, which there is momentum. When NCBA goes to DC and every time they're in front of the Senate, the first thing they say is we need support for the checkoff. You know that there is a big backlash against the beef checkoff. Um, and I feel
Well,
like the
so
most common ground this cattle industry has seen since I've started covering this. And it does, and I get what they're saying. The common ground is hard to find in the cattle industry. Like we don't agree on certain things, but there's reasons for that. And it's because there is so many of these factions. But I feel like the most common ground I've ever seen is when NCBA tried to push the mandated EID policy for all cattle. Every facet of the industry push back on that. You had sale barn guys making videos that never made videos before. You had ranchers out in the field that talking on Facebook, typing. I mean, it was a groundswell of support against the mandated EID. Um, and the fact that them saying we can't talk about certain things. I think Jack Payne had the best analogy of this. He said it's like a husband and wife counselor or a husband and wife going into the marriage counselor, and before you go in, the husband says, "Okay, we can't talk about how I beat on you. We can't talk about how I have four girlfriends. We can't talk about, all this bad stuff that we have done to you." And meaning, the beef industry,
I get
all
it.
of these things that they have pushed on the producer being the abusive husband, and then the cattlemen coming in and agreeing, okay, we aren't going to talk about those things. Let's create a future for ourselves without
Well,
talking about those abuses.
Well, certainly the people surrounded at those tables, after you do a little study and you figure out that they are a part of that faction that does not support mandatory country of origin labeling. They're probably for EID. They do not want checkoff reform. And so my question to you is this uh, Unity Summit connected in any way or related any way to like the NCBA and the Farm Bureau, who also believes those same policies, as I just explained. And then last week we kind of exposed the Food Agriculture Alliance. Is all of this interwoven, or is this Producer Unity Summit, Common Ground Summit, is it totally separate? And is it a new set of people? I mean, that's what, because as I watch down, and I see what you're saying, the some of these tax policies are really, really good that they're promoting. They want to retain the stepped up basis, right? And preserve the lifetime exemption amounts. They want to bring back the 100% bonus depreciation. Those are all things that matter to American producers. But then I have a little trouble when we get down into their risk management category and they say, well, we want to increase the livestock risk protection subsidy level. I mean, to me, that's just more, give us more, right?
Yeah, it's
And
just like
so,
every policy handbook you ever read. We want to robust funding. We want robust funding,
yeah,
which if that is a part of continuing getting people to stay in business in agriculture, I'm not saying I'm against it.
I don't understand all that either. I don't participate in it and I don't want to participate in it, but people are really pushing me too. But I'm just kind of a different guy. I like that. I like the options that a hedging brings to me down the
Gambling
road.
man.
I'm a gambler. I'm a gambler. Uh,
Um,
One thing that did catch my eye on it is I love the idea of creating support to reemerge the youth back into the program, into the industry, but at the same time, it caught my eye that it said they developed technologies targeted at increasing efficiency in livestock production. Now, that's something else we're going to talk about today, and that has me a little bit on edge.
Yeah, and what I saw was increasing efficiencies towards sustainability,
Yes,
and that just makes me think climate,
absolutely.
because that's what we've read about for all these years. And yeah, and so when you go through that list of people, I didn't know that many people on it, but one of them is Ibach out of Nebraska. His wife is currently trying to get rid of brand inspections in favor of EID at feedlots.
That's right.
And it just seems like a lot of the people, they didn't bring anyone in that they didn't think would have the common. It's like they
Oh, they're
brought
not going
in
to bring,
people that, oh, these
yeah.
all these people are going to agree on this stuff.
You and I ain't going to get in there. I
Well,
mean, they
I don't
don't,
want to get in there.
that's not something they don't want,
I
you
don't.
know,
Yeah, I
they don't want anybody bucking. I think that's with all groups though. But one of the things that I saw on Facebook was um, a comment by an individual that was there talking about how they're going to utilize lobbyists in Washington, D.C. Um, to implement their policy among the in the cattle industry. And as you well know, in America, it's not, I mean, I don't hide that. I think that we need to get rid of lobbying. I think that a paid lobbyist has hurt the America First policy and the American way of life. And so, if they want to lobby, I think they shouldn't have to, I don't think they should take money for lobbying. And so that was a little eye-opening for me there. I was like, well, there you go. Same old stuff, pay to play, and I don't like it.
yeah, and I
But
think,
their policies, some of those policies are pretty decent.
and when you look at how anything's been gotten accomplished in DC, you can't be like, well, we're not going to lobby because that's pretty much how anything's gotten accomplished in DC over the last few years. But I think another glaring
No, we need to make
motivation,
the dadgum legislators read the freaking bills
right?
and
Yeah.
pass on merit, not
Or
on
maybe
lobby,
even
not on
write the
who gets
bills and
paid.
not have lobbyists write the bills. And that goes into the other motivation of why this is happening and why it's happening now is we have a farm bill that's going to be up in September. And they want, the people in that room want what they want in there and they don't want certain things in there. Um, and it's hard to look at this deal and not think that that's why this is happening.
Let me read the vision. The vision of the Common Ground Summit was to unite the industry in preserving America's agriculture land for future generations while strengthening and expanding the livestock producers who rely on it to feed the world. Their mission is to unify the livestock industry by clearly defining its needs, aligning stakeholders, and effectively communicating with policymakers and the public. Through strategic advocacy and collaboration, we seek to establish a clear path forward toward meaningful policy and industry advancements that support livestock producers and ensure the future of agriculture. One of those one of those issues that came up, I'm pretty sure, is the issues of conservation easements. And I am
It came
taking
up
a
in the summit.
I think so. How do we hold this land together for the next generation? And that's a very important conversation that we need to have. And I am very anti agriculture conservation easements. If you truly want to hold the land together for future generations, you can do it without obtaining a partnership with some ENGO or NGO, and you can do it without being paid to do it. I think that's very important, and it shows really the heart of the issue. So, if they are promoting conservation easements, there is a line of delineation between the West producers and the East producers. The producers in the West are starting to go through the results of what conservation easements can do to people. And at the end of them, it's not good. I mean, the majority of them are not happy with these easements because the next generation is passing on, and then the new landowners or the new landholders get to reap the benefits or not the benefits of these easements. These are fairly new concepts on the eastern side of the United States. I think those people have a lot to learn. And Um, I just never have been a proponent of those things. And listen, uh, our ranch is right in the middle of a whole huge block of conservation easements, and so I have that experience to kind of talk against that. So I hope that's
That goes
I
into
hope they
the other
find.
another problem though is we don't know what they talked about. We don't know what they shot down.
Yeah, I mean,
We
did they
don't know
take a
what they
vote?
started with or what they ended up with.
No, I agree.
Someone posted, one of the attendees said it was 3 long days.
Whoa, really?
And that's the thing, like you bring in these people that are all supposed to speak for us. It's invite only. There's no votes that I heard anything about. I mean, that's the reason these conventions exist is they have policy votes, and any media member can get a media badge and attend. I've talked to a media person who had no idea it was even going on, like a legit one, not like us, but a legit media person. And I mean that kind of stuff should be reported on. It just seemed like a closed door thing, and then they walk out and they're like, "This is what the cattle industry wants to do." And whether you
Well,
agree with it or not, I
yeah.
don't think that's a good process
Well, the beautiful
going
thing about it,
forward.
no, I agree, but the beautiful thing about it is there are independent producers out there like me and you, and we will continue to bang the drum, right? I mean, it's important. Our consumers have issues that mean a lot. There are things that mean a lot to them, and we need to fight for those consumers, and we need to fight for our local producers. I mean, the mod story is one of those stories. If you don't think that wasn't a food security issue, you're wrong. That was something that we needed to fight for. So we can do it. We just got to educate, brother.
Yeah, right on. And I don't want to be a Debbie Downer about everything. So, I mean, last week I said some. I should go back and correct myself because last week I was I'd been in the planner till midnight the night before, got in at like 1 o'clock. And then all this stuff that we had been going looking at, these gene editing and the mod story and all of this kind of stuff, it just makes you look at all this corruption and how it ties into agriculture and everything. And I said one time, I said going back, I was like, I don't know if there is any truth in agriculture anymore. And I wish I wouldn't have said that. We talk enough on here. There's always things I wish I wouldn't have said, but that one kind of bugged me because I thought it was kind of cool the way the podcast last week, for the few people that did watch it last week, I started out by saying that, and then we went through all our different issues, and in the end, in the Lonesome History, I talked about this cowboy that was dying and how he cried like a baby because he couldn't cowboy anymore. And then you told a story about your dad who was dying and his horse laying his head on his shoulder. And it was kind of like, there's the truth in agriculture,
Yeah.
you know.
Oh,
And as we go forward to this week, we have this family who's been attacked by the federal government and had a groundswell of grassroots support come up behind them and get the attention of these people that whose attention we needed and their case was dropped yesterday, and that's the truth in agriculture. There's so much truth in agriculture around us that we kind of forget about it. Or you can start digging into these issues and seeing all this corruption and this money trading hands, and it can jade you, I guess, a little bit. And I'm getting jaded, but
of
that's
course,
where a lot of my skepticism comes from.
I understand that. I understand that, but I'm often reminded by me. It often reminds me of a very good friend of mine, and she always says, "Shad, we have to get back to the foundation of our country. We have to get back to the very grassroots level." And it's not that we aren't there. We aren't there politically. We're not there commercially or financially, but we are there on the land. And that was one thing the mod deal proved to us is that they are at the very core is common American ranchers that produce food for their family and their nation and their community. And that if we don't leave that, if we don't leave that very foundation of grassroots production. The people that came west in the covered wagons, and we don't forget that, how hard it was for them to build their homes and build their ranches. And some of them built empires and stayed, and some of them lost everything, but they all tried. And that's the very grassroots of the American foundation that we need to get back to. And we need to make it available to everybody who wishes to participate. And we cannot, I will always say, we cannot have groups and power legislators out there who pick the winners and losers. Is a very dangerous ground to be on, because in a free country, uh, the consumer gets to dictate what is marketable, not the power groups.
Yeah, and that's, that goes into where I was kind of going back on, we've gotten so far away from the consumer. I was running the soybean planter, and Jack Payne calls me, who's raises cattle on 1,000 hills out in Nevada, and he's like, "What do we do with soybeans?" And I'm kind of like, "Oh hell, I don't even know." Actually, I joked with him. I was like, "We make poison." And but yeah, I mean, it just goes back to, we need to get back to those roots and figure this stuff out. And that's kind of why we're here. We're not here to give any answers. We're just trying to figure it out, and hopefully helping some other people figure things out too.
Yep.
Uh, what was next?
Which takes us into, when we talk about sustainable development and continuous improvement, we have, the Angus Association joining the global initiative to improve livestock efficiency. We've been talking about genetic alteration and all that to improve efficiency for quite a while now. And so they have partnered up with Jeff Bezos from the Bezos Earth Fund and the Global Methane Hub to actually change genetics and start feeding additives that will alter the way cattle process their food. And the problem with this is, um, I'm not a member of the Angus Association. I don't care. But the problem with this
I
is
care.
that on one side you have the Bezos Earth Fund that says our obsession with protein is fueling climate change. What can we do? This gentleman by the name of Andy Jarvis wrote this article, the P problem that's eating the planet. And that means the protein problem that is eating the planet. And he said, we need to produce uh, less protein and more protein by the way of alternative proteins by 2050. Otherwise, we're going to lose our planet. So then you have the Angus people getting $25 million. I think that's what it was. $27.4 million in this initiative from the global or from the Bezos Earth Fund and the Global Methane Hub to help them learn how to reduce methane extraction from beef production, right? The Angus people are partnering up with the people who hate cattle and
They
want them
have
off
full
this
on
planet.
agreed to the lie that
It's
cattle
just
are destroying the
unbelievable.
environment. The
I,
American
I, I
Angus Association is partnering up with people who believe that the cattle are destroying the environment. And it
I
goes
can't.
into everything. Like the
Yep.
the problem with protein, our one of our most essential nutrients that we eat, and we have a huge problem with it. And it goes right into carbon. Oh, it's such a huge problem. It's what our plants eat. Like these are essential nutrients, essential things for life on this planet, and we have this major problem with them that we have to fix. It's it goes right back into this common ground thing, where we have these kinds of issues, and when I hear certain words like increasing cattle efficiency to promote sustainability, that reminds me of what I talked about in last week or 2 weeks ago, where it's like they want to alter the genes of cattle so that we produce less cattle.
And
Um,
where do they stop from there? Once we do that, where do we stop? Right?
Yeah.
Where do
And
it's
maybe
kind of,
that line doesn't have anything to do with it. I'm just telling you, I'm incredibly skeptical. So when you talk about you want to increase efficiency in cattle to increase sustainability, I'm thinking, okay, you want to create cattle more efficient to create less methane and save the climate because you've bought into the bullshit. and it just drives me nuts. But and as far as the Angus Association doing this, like I said, these associations are supposed to have meetings and policy votes. Who's signing up for that?
Not me.
I don't know. And at what point, I get it. They're valuable. These breed associations are valuable, organizations. But at what
Well,
point do
they've
you
come a
just
long
say,
way. I mean, they've created,
no, thank you?
they've created these. I mean, I will say as a stocker operator, our cattle are better than they've ever been as far as quality and yield. But and these and like the Angus Association, they did a great job of marketing their product over the years and increasing yield and quality and all of that stuff that means a lot to us. But then when they get on board to something like this, the global initiative to improve livestock efficiency with the Bezos Earth Fund, and yet we know for a fact we've given up, and I'm not just saying the Angus, but all people for quality. As a stocker guy, our improvement in the quality of those cattle we have given something up, and that has been immunity to health, the ability to move across the land and structure. I mean, we've given some things up. So why aren't we working on those instead of a way to reduce? Because ultimately, these stories lead to the reduction of of producers on the land because they're not going to get on board with some of this stuff. And what are we doing on the other hand of messing with God, what God has already made? I mean, it's a problem. And you got all of these not only organizations, but like right here, where was it at? The University of Nebraska. They take money in to promote this or promote the research on this stuff. Um, Here it is, right here. 2.34 million to the University of Nebraska to lead research on low methane beef genetics in commercial and crossbred cattle populations. 4.85 million to the Angus Foundation to integrate low methane traits into the beef cattle breeding program. What does that look like? 8.7 million to accelerate low emission dairy breeding across Holstein, Jersey, Brown Swiss, and red breeds. It's taken us generations to increase the efficiency of these cattle. So is this going to happen overnight? Is it going to take generations more? 3.35 million to advance methane efficient breeding in indigenous African cattle led by the International Livestock Research Institute of Kenya. And it doesn't stop there. And
And this
we've
is
got
all from USDA.
no, this is all from Bezos Earth Fund.
Oh,
And it doesn't stop there. We know that methane satellite has been put up there. It's called MethSat, and they've put it up there in 2021, and it will alert authorities, so to speak, of the high methane emission producers in oil and agriculture. That's what it was designed for. So
yeah.
they're picking winners and losers, and
And I'm
it's
all
it.
for efficiency. I'm all for more efficient cattle,
Me
but I'd
too.
say, how about we make more efficient cattle and we make more cattle and we increase the beef demand? We show consumers that this is the most nutritious and best product that you can eat in the world. And we increase the amount of beef they're eating every year, and we increase the number of cattle, and we increase the number of producers. Because all of this efficiency talk is decrease. The end result, if you read the full
Exactly.
sentence, at the end of the sentence, it's decrease. Well, how about I'm fine with increasing efficiency, but I don't want to decrease anything. I want to build the industry and not shrink it. And that's what all this stuff leads to. And that's what's infuriating. I mean, and so it goes into, I guess last week we talked about, um, I thought it was funny because most people have no idea. I don't think it was reported, at least I didn't see it reported, of who the number one contributor to Trump's inauguration was. And we were just sitting here and Chad just, what did you Google it on your phone or something?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was the JBS owned Pilgrim's Pride. Um, and did you come up with anything else about that?
I came up with, did you know that in 2021, Pilgrim's Pride was had $107 million fine for price fixing in their industry. And now they are the largest contributor to Donald Trump's inaugural celebration. So I would like to hear some great history on your subject, Pilgrim's Pride.
Well, not exactly Pilgrim's Pride,
Oh,
but
okay.
this is a tale. So one thing I did like about that Cattle Kingdom book, which I talked about, I that's one of the first things we talked about, was the Johnson County War. But he
Yeah,
actually went into the beginnings of the beef packing industry. And he actually talked about Delmonico's in New York and how it was like the first steakhouse, and he went into all that. And so I thought we talked about the Cudahy and how they got started. So I thought we should talk about the biggest beef packer in the world, JBS, and their history, which is Juan Batista Sobrinho. That's JBS, Juan Batista Sobrinho. Um, and he started it. He was butchering oxen in what they said oxen in Brazil, and started his own little packing plant. And then he bought a few more plants, and he had some kids, and they took it to the biggest packing plant in the world. Um, and how that happened in the U.S., they came in and bought Swift, and then they bought Smithfield Beef, and then they bought Five Rivers Feedlots, which at the time could feed out 800,000 cattle.
which was illegal.
Right. And then it's illegal for beef packers to own feedlots. But I mean, that's something to look into. I think Cargill owned a bunch too, and they sold out their feedlots around the same time JBS did.
Yeah, I think they were forced to.
Maybe that's what happened. Maybe that's another episode of Lonesome History. Um, but then they attempted to buy National Beef, and which is the fourth largest beef packer in the country. So and I think Swift at the time was fifth. Um, or I can't remember which place it was, but it was one of the top ones. So if JBS had bought Swift and National Beef, we'd have three major beef packers, and
Right.
JBS would have a massive majority of the beef packing. But the Department of Justice came in, and several states sued in order to stop that transaction because of it's just too much concentration at the time. And at the time, Pilgrim's Pride was going bankrupt, and JBS um, they dropped their idea of buying National Beef, and they got into the chicken business with Pilgrim's Pride. And after they bought that Pilgrim's Pride, 70% of JBS South America's revenue was coming from the U.S.
Wow.
So they're a
Wow.
Brazilian-based company making 70% of their revenue from US-based companies.
Consumers.
Yes. And then a little something happened where the people running JBS were investigated, pled guilty to bribing 1,800 politicians. The way the whole thing worked was they there was BNDS, which is Brazilian Development Bank. I don't know what everything stands for, but it's a Brazilian bank ran by the government, and they were giving loans to JBS to go all throughout the world and buy up beef packing plants. And the owners were bribing the government in order to um, get these loans.
Like they were paying for votes or what?
No, they were just giving them money, and then they were able. Yeah, I mean,
When
they
you
were
say they were paying the government.
they were paying the president of Brazil, who is now once again after serving prison, the president of Brazil. It was called Lula. He was the main guy they were bribing, and he was kind of implicated in by name in all this stuff. There was a guy Mantegna, um, who was taking the money, and it was for into an account that was for Lula, and then it was for Dilma, which was the next president, and then it was for Temer, which was the next president. So they ended up bribing three different presidents of Brazil over $150 million, I think, hundreds of millions of dollars they gave away for bribes to become this billion-dollar global empire and own a massive amount of U.S. beef industry. They pled guilty. They went to prison, um, but they were able to hold on. And guess what year this historic thing happened?
2000.
I'll say it because
Oh,
you're gonna guess something dumber. You're gonna guess. I'm thinking like people are hearing this and they're like, oh, that had to happen 50 years ago, or 30 years ago. This happened in 2017 is when the investigation happened. At the time of the investigation, Jose and Wesley Batista, the owners of JBS who were being investigated, were nominated to the board of Pilgrim's Pride that they had purchased. And while they were being investigated, they didn't tell anybody that all this was going on. They're investigated by Brazil and by the U.S. And Pilgrim's Pride put them on the board. Um, they later resigned and didn't say why while all this was going on. I mean, and
from
then
the
they
board.
continued to bribe government officials. They continue during their investigation of bribing government officials in Brazil. They were bribing government officials in Brazil, and it still came out. Like they just kept doing it, um, because they thought they could get away with it. And Brazil, I believe, is an incredibly corrupt country. I mean, just go into how does the guy who is taking the bribes, he gets indicted, he gets found guilty on all this stuff, and then now he's back as the president. I think he might have went to jail. Now he's back as the president of Brazil, which when you go into this, it is very damning. Now we have Pilgrim's Pride could be considered the most corrupt business in meatpacking. I mean, JBS overall, I think, is the most corrupt company in the world by far, and they're the number one contributor to Trump's inauguration dinner. That is something that deserves more attention. Not for Trump taking the money or whatever, but like what is going on there. And one
Well,
thing I
sir,
do think is very almost telling and important during some of this stuff going on, there was a senator who asked for an investigation into JBS, and his name was Marco Rubio, our current Secretary of State. So even after,
really?
so Trump got inaugurated, had Pilgrim's Pride, and the one person who wanted to investigate JBS, he named Secretary of State. So hopefully that's a good sign
Now
that Trump
that
isn't
is
going
a
to.
piece of history right there. That is
There's way more to it. It never ends.
okay.
It turned. Oh, so one of the notes I took, $5 billion is what they got from that bank to buy all that kind of stuff. And but I got all this out of this book. Whoop, whoop. Raw Deal by
Okay.
Chloe Sorvino. Not the best book. Well, I've always said people should write a book about this story. And then she came out with this book. She wrote 2 chapters about the story. The rest of it is all this climate crap. I mean, it's an interesting book. Here's how far I got. I read it. I mean, I started it a couple years ago and I've got, I don't know, I got over halfway before I was just like, it was just constant climate, climate, climate. This is what's
Like pro
happening.
climate change?
Oh, I mean, it's what beef, it's pro beef industry, but it's very warning of what the beef is, what the cattle industry is doing to the climate. And it talks about how plant-based is a bunch of fraud and all that kind of stuff. And the lab meat is kind of a shell game too. But like I said, I didn't finish it. But my main reason for buying it and wanting to read it is because of this JBS deal. And so I just wanted to go over a couple of the key points. And if you go into the dates, the historic dates, they bought Swift in 2007. That's when they first started really kind of rolling and buying up these companies all around the world. Um, and then in 2008, just a year later, so they bought Swift, Smithfield, Five Rivers in a year. And then they tried to get National Beef. And that's
I,
when the
yeah,
Department of Justice all of a sudden was like, hold up.
I remember that.
Yeah. And so National, but she said JBS, this is part of the book. JBS has exposed failures of government oversight. Many policymakers turned away as billionaire-owned foreign equity acquired iconic U.S. meat brands funds obtained in part through foreign corruption and bribery. Industry workers, consumers, and farmers have suffered the impacts. And this goes back to the common ground, our industry leaders. When I read this kind of stuff and I hear 2008, 2007, 2017 is when we found out. how this all came down, where have the industry leaders been to me? I mean, I started reporting on the beef industry in 2017, I think. Or yeah. I think I started Lonesome Lands in like November 2017. So I've been looking at things for 8 years, and it's for the entire time it has blown my mind that JBS is the number one beef packer in the world most of the time. They kind of are neck and neck with Tyson last I looked as far as the largest beef packer in the U.S. Um, Brazilian based, 70% of their revenue comes from the U.S. It's just, how did we get here? How did we get to the point where this company with so much power and so obvious? I mean, one of the things they were supposed to be fined like $500,000 or something because from the U.S. because they gave away one of their bribes
Uh,
was a Manhattan apartment, an apartment in Manhattan. So they were using U.S. real estate to bribe Brazilian officials. Illegal. All of these companies were obtained illegally, and they're still the number one beef packer in the U.S. But that
well,
fine got cut in half for no, I mean, I've never seen anybody give a reason why. They just didn't have to pay it.
all I can tell you is the main question is how did we get here? Congress.
Yeah. But then it's
Congress
like,
allowed it.
where's the investigation? This company does nothing but bribe politicians. That's how
And
they got
that's
into power.
and that's
What?
not just politicians from Brazil, buddy.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. Since arriving in America, JBS companies have earned nearly 900 million from federal contracts. That's including 9 million contracts signed on the day Temer recording leaked in May 2017. That was a Brazilian president. He was recorded by one of the Batista brothers as part of a plea deal thing. More than 400 million in contracts through the USDA has been paid to JBS and Pilgrim's Pride for its meat in the last 5 years, over 150 million of which was purchased in 2019 alone. JBS gets millions more from other U.S. government agencies. I mean, so there you go. We have this company that was built on bribing politicians. 150 million purchased in 2019 by the federal government. Um, and so another thing they did, and in the same time, JBS has locked up key hires, among the most notable being Al Almanza, the USDA's former Food Safety and Inspections Division chief, who worked for the USDA for nearly 40 years. 3 days after Almanza retired at the end of July 2017, amid JBS's tainted beef scandal, he took up shop as JBS's global head of food safety and quality assurance. Right after Almanza, JBS appointed former Speaker of the House John Boehner and former SEC Chairman Harvey Pitt to an independent advisory board. I mean, it's just so blatantly and in your face. Um, and so one of the last things I wanted to talk about in here, and it goes into the common ground kind of certain policy things they want to talk about, certain policy things they don't want to talk about. While all of this was going on, remember in the 2015 era, there was a major thing that happened in the beef industry.
I remember
Um,
it well.
the American government has, this is from the book, the American government has rules that stipulate how labels should note which country the meat comes from. They are called country of origin labeling requirements. But notably, the rules were repealed for beef and pork in 2015, passed through a legislative rider in the Appropriations Committee's year-end omnibus package. It opened up U.S. beef markets to compete with some 3 billion of imports a year. The imported meat can still be labeled as product of the USA as long as the beef is processed a bit more at a U.S. plant. Now, you think about that. What's going on in the world? These people are bribing every politician they can get their hand on, thousands of politicians. And at the same time, they're importing however much meat into the U.S. And at the same time, the U.S. government repeals country of origin labeling. Um, and so,
The perfect storm.
right. And at the end of this paragraph is Greg Gunthorpe,
Yeah.
who I believe listens some, and he says Gunthrop describes it as the largest extraction of wealth in the meat business from farms. Gunthrop is also quoted in here. JBS does not deserve the right to be in the meat business in the United States of America, and I'm not afraid to say that. There's a lot who are, Gunthrop said, meaning there's a lot of people who are afraid that JBS does not deserve to be in the meat business in the U.S. And so that all has been going on. They have been fined. There was a lawsuit that came out a few years ago in the beef industry, and JBS has settled. It's a similar lawsuit. There's three different, McDonald's just joined in on the deal. JBS has settled. Now, I think this most recent settlement, if it goes through, would be over 150 million to settle these lawsuits about price fixing in the beef industry from 2014 and on. And the people involved in those lawsuits were not invited to the Common Ground Summit. So